My name is Sienna Hart. I am 27 now. People say time softens sharp edges. But some nights, the past still presses against my ribs like a blade. I built a quiet life in Austin. A small condo, a tiny balcony garden, a job that pays the bills. From the outside, I look fine. Inside, there is a room I never open. Tonight I will. I will walk you back to Tulsa, to the night a family name meant more than a daughter. I was 17, packing for college, when the call came. Come over, everyone is here. The house smelled like lemon polish, an old cedar. The dining room lamp threw a tired gold over faces I loved, or thought I did. My father, Robert, with that straight back he carried from the Marines. My stepmother, Lorraine, smoothing a wrinkle only she could see. Marcus, my older brother, quiet as always. Evelyn, my sister, the one who used to share headphones with me on long drives. My Aunt Margaret, and her daughter Harper, eyes bright, mouth sharp, always measuring. A lawyer cleared his throat and started reading my grandmother's will. The words felt heavy. Furniture, photos, parcels of land. Then he paused. The necklace. My grandmother's diamond necklace, the one that appeared in every wedding picture before I was born. He reached for a velvet box on the table, opened it, and air rushed in, empty. The room did not breathe for a beat. Then chairs scraped. Someone whispered, "It must be a mistake." The lawyer looked pale. My stepmother's hand found her pearls. My Aunt Margaret's eyes slid around the table like a searchlight and landed on me. She did not say my name. She did not have to. Harper stood first. She moved with a confidence I had never owned. Maybe we should make sure nothing has been misplaced. Her voice was honey poured over gravel. She walked down the hall, and I felt something cold settle between my shoulder blades. The bedrooms smelled like dust and lavender. Drawers opened, doors clicked. I stood in the doorway of the room that used to be mine. The desk where I wrote essays, the corkboard with concert stubs, a drawer I had cleaned out last week. Harper tugged it open and turned triumphant. The velvet box sat in her palm like a verdict. Empty. Still empty. "See?" she said. "It is right here." I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. I remember saying no. I remember saying it again. Not a scream, just a broken thing, barely crossing the space between us. My father asked me to explain. His voice was low, careful. A voice for explosives. I told him I had not touched it. I told him I would never. The words felt small, like I had brought a paper umbrella into a storm. Lorraine did not raise her voice. She said, "We took you in as our own, fed you, clothed you, and this is the thanks we get." The room shifted. Marcus stared at the floor. Evelyn would not meet my eyes. I reached for her anyway. "Remember when we were little? When we tried on Grandma's jewelry and she laughed? Remember?" She looked past me, as if the wall behind my head had grown a window. My Aunt Margaret folded her arms. "It is not complicated," she said. "The box is in your drawer. The necklace is gone. People do not misplace heirlooms like that." Harper leaned against the doorframe. A small, satisfied smile. "It did not suit you anyway, cousin. I wanted to tear the house apart, until truth fell from a vent or a baseboard. I wanted to scream until glass shook. Instead, I stood very still. When I think back now, that stillness was the moment something inside me cracked and began to harden. My father rubbed his forehead. He said, "We cannot have a scandal. We cannot carry this into the world. You will leave for a while. Let things settle. For the good of the family. For the good of the family." I packed a bag under a sky the color of dishwater. Tulsa nights have a damp chill that climbs your sleeves. My suitcase wheels rattled across the walkway, like a cart in a hospital corridor. On the porch, I looked back. One last time. A curtain lifted and fell. The house did not wave. I slept on a friend's couch, staring at a ceiling fan that ticked like a clock with a stutter. In the morning, I washed my face in a sink that was not mine, and whispered to the girl in the mirror, "You are not a thief. You are not." The college acceptance email sat in my inbox like a dare. "Go," it said. "Go anyway." I wish I could tell you one of them called. I wish I could say Evelyn texted at midnight. Sorry I froze. The silence was perfect, polished. A family heirloom passed from hand to hand. A week later, a message slid into my phone from an unknown number. "Do not come back. It is better for everyone." The words smelled like bleach. When I close my eyes, I still see the empty box in Harper's palm. How light it looked. How heavy it felt. Back then, I thought emptiness was the worst thing you could find. I was wrong. Emptiness can be filled with a story, with a lie, with a girl who is easier to blame because her last name fits but her blood does not. Years later, I would replay the details until they lost their edges. The lemon polish, the cedar, the lawyer's pause, the way Harper knew exactly which drawer to open. I did not know then what I know now. That a plan had already been set. That convenience can dress itself as certainty. That families will choose a neat story over a messy truth when pride is at stake. But that night, I only knew this. I had no home to go back to, and no way to prove what I was not. I carried my bag to the bus station. I bought a ticket with money I had saved from babysitting and summer shifts. The woman at the window asked, "Where to?" I said Austin, and my voice did not tremble. On the bench, I counted my breaths, in and out, until the ache in my chest found a rhythm it could live with. Before dawn, the bus rolled past the edge of town. The Hart name stayed behind like a billboard fading in the rear view. I pressed my forehead to the glass and made myself a promise I could not yet imagine keeping. I would find a way to grow something from this scorched ground. I would make a life that did not ask permission. And if the past ever came back to breathe on my neck, I would turn and face it. I would make it speak. I would make it tell me where the necklace went, and who decided I was the easiest sacrifice. That is how it began. Not with handcuffs or headlines, with a box that held nothing, and a house that chose to believe that nothing was me. I was 18 when I unpacked my life into a dorm room that smelled like paint and detergent. The walls were white, too white, like they wanted to erase me. I taped a few photos above the bed, old snapshots with friends' postcards I had saved. But there were no family pictures, not anymore. College came with its own kind of noise, laughter in hallways, footsteps at 2 a.m, the slam of doors and the squeak of sneakers on tile. I told myself I would blend in, just another freshman with a scholarship and a backpack that still smelled like the store. But whispers travel faster than footsteps. Tulsa is not far from Austin. Stories bleed across borders. Someone always knows someone. By the second week, I could feel it. The sideways glances. The sudden hush when I entered the cafeteria line. The little smirk on a stranger's face. They had heard. The girl who stole her grandmother's necklace. The thief with the pretty smile. The Hart family scandal. I kept my head down. I went to class. I studied until my eyes blurred. The scholarship was my lifeline. The only proof I could survive without anyone's permission. At night, I worked shifts at a coffee shop 2 blocks from campus. The smell of espresso clung to my clothes. Milk foam crusted on my hands. Tips bought ramen and bus passes. Homework lived in the margins of napkins. Sometimes a customer would stare a second too long, as if they recognized me from a story told around someone else's dinner table. And maybe they did. I would smile anyway. My best armor. Still, every time my phone buzzed, my stomach folded in on itself. At first, it was just silence. No calls from Evelyn, no letters from Marcus. Then the messages began. Do not come back. It is better for everyone. They came from numbers I did not know. Blocked. Hidden. Each one colder than the last. Words that smelled like bleach. I told myself it was nothing. Cruel pranks. College kids can be thoughtless. But late at night, in the quiet hours when the hum of the mini fridge was the only sound, I wondered. Who wanted me gone so badly? Who needed me silent? Back then, I thought it was just more punishment, just more salt in the wound. Now, at 27, I see it differently. Those messages were not random. They were not careless. They were a hand pressing down on my mouth. A warning dressed as advice. I survived by building routines. Wake up, class, work, study until my eyes burned, sleep in a bed that never felt mine. There was no softness, no one waiting with tea, no Evelyn sneaking into my room to borrow a sweater. Just me, and the silence that came with being marked. I tried dating once, a boy with messy hair who loved music more than anything. He asked why I never brought him home for holidays. I told him my family traveled. I told him they were busy. I told him everything but the truth. Because how do you explain that your last name is a cage? That your father called you a thief without ever saying the word? That your sister looked away when you begged her to remember? So I smiled instead, and I carried the weight alone. There were moments, though, tiny sparks that kept me breathing. A professor who told me my writing had teeth. A customer who left a $10 bill folded like a swan. The sound of rain against the library windows when I was the last one awake. Little things. But sometimes little things are all that stand between you and the dark. Looking back now, I wonder how I didn't break. Maybe I did, a little. Maybe that is what exile does. It chips at you until you are more scar than skin. But scars can harden into something else. A shield, a blade, a promise. At 19, I whispered that promise to myself each night. You are not a thief. You are not. One day, they will see. One day, the truth will crawl out of the shadows they buried it in. And when it does, I will be ready to face it. When I think of those 4 years of college, it feels like watching a younger version of myself walk across a tightrope with no net. I was 18 when I first stepped onto that campus in Austin. A scholarship had opened the door not out of kindness, but out of numbers. My grades, my essays, the hours I stacked between babysitting and summer shifts. That piece of paper gave me a chance. But nothing else was guaranteed. The first night in my dorm, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling tiles. The voices in the hall were cheerful, laughing. Kids with duffel bags full of things their parents helped them carry in. I had one suitcase and a backpack. I had no one standing in the doorway waving goodbye. And even if I had, I don't know if I would have waved back. I worked mornings in the campus library, afternoons in the student cafe, balancing trays, burning my fingertips on mugs of coffee. At night I studied until the words blurred. And yet, there was always a shadow that walked with me. Whispers that had followed me out of Tulsa. People had heard pieces of the story. How I was accused of stealing a necklace. How I had been asked to leave. Gossip has long legs. And I could feel the weight of eyes that wondered if the rumors were true. I tried to live inside silence, to speak only when I had to keep my head down, and move forward one step at a time. Still, every so often, my phone would buzz with a message from an unknown number. Do not come back. Better for everyone. Sometimes it said nothing but my name, written like a warning. At the time, I thought it was cruelty. I thought someone in Tulsa was still laughing at me, still kicking dust on the place where my name had been buried. Now, years later, I understand something different. Someone was afraid I might return. Afraid I might start asking questions. Those messages were not meant to scare me away. They were meant to seal my silence. There was one class that saved me from drowning American literature. The professor, Dr. Whitaker, had the kind of eyes that looked at you as if you were worth listening to. One afternoon, after I stayed behind to return a book, he asked if I was sleeping at all. I told him I was fine. The lie came too easily. He did not push. Instead, he said, "Your writing carries weight, Sienna, not because of words, but because of what you've survived." No one had said that to me before. Survived. The word struck deep. It felt like a hand pressing against the wound, not to hurt me, but to stop the bleeding. He encouraged me to apply for research positions, helped me find paid internships, reminded me that I could build more than survival. Slowly, I did. I began to believe that maybe the story written about me back in Tulsa, the story of a thief, of a disappointment, did not have to be the only one people read. But it was not easy. There were nights I walked back from work with my shoes soaked in rain, carrying a textbook under my jacket, whispering to myself that I could do this, that I was not broken. There were mornings when exhaustion pulled at my bones, and I thought about quitting. Yet every time I wanted to give up, I saw my father's face again, the way he said, "For the good of the family." And something inside me snapped back into place. Not for their good, for mine. By junior year, I had managed to move into a tiny off-campus apartment. The walls were thin, the heater groaned, but it was mine. Mine in a way nothing had ever been before. I hung one photo on the wall, not of family, but of a tree on campus that bloomed white every spring. A reminder that life could split open into color, even after a long winter. Looking back now, I can say this. I once believed that injustice had killed me, that the betrayal had poisoned me beyond repair. But I was wrong. What it did was temper me. Steel is not born steel. It is forced into fire, hammered, cooled, and struck again. I was not destroyed in those years. I was forged. Still, the silence never left. No call from Evelyn. No letter from Marcus. No word from my father. Only shadows, whispers, and the occasional sting of another message, reminding me that my exile was permanent. I carried that ache with me, to every lecture hall, every midnight shift, every exam. It never left, but I learned to carry it differently. Not as a chain, but as a weight I could build muscle around. By the time I walked across the graduation stage, I felt taller than I had 4 years before. My name was called, and for once, it did not sound like an accusation. It sounded like a beginning. And standing there in my cap and gown, holding a degree that I had carved out of nights and years, I whispered a promise to myself. One day, I will return. Not as the girl they exiled, not as the scapegoat they chose, but as the woman they tried to erase, and could not. When I think back to that night in 2023, I can still feel the weight of the room pressing against my skin. It was a charity gala in Dallas. Chandeliers, glowing glasses, clinking, the kind of place where people laugh too loudly at things that don't matter. I remember standing there in a borrowed gown, satin that didn't quite feel like mine, heels that pinched my feet. For a moment, I thought about leaving before it even began, but I told myself I belonged there. I had worked for every step, every hour, every chance that had led me through those doors. The music drifted softly, violins mingling with the hum of conversations. Women in glittering dresses leaned in to whisper. Men in tailored suits shook hands like kings. I felt like an intruder, but also like someone who had finally broken into the world that once seemed closed forever. I tried to remind myself, this was not their world anymore. It was mine, too. Not given to me, not inherited, but earned. And then, my eyes caught something. A glimmer, a flash beneath the chandelier's light. At first, I thought it was just another jewel, one of the many that sparkled across that room. But then the shape came into focus. A necklace. Not just any necklace. The necklace. The one that had ruined me. My chest tightened so fast I couldn't breathe. The voices around me turned hollow, muffled like I was underwater. All I could see was that necklace hanging against the collarbone of a woman I had never met. She was older, elegant, her laughter smooth and practiced. She touched the jewel lightly as she spoke, as if it were nothing. Just another ornament in a sea of ornaments. But I knew every curve of that pendant, every sharp edge of the setting, every detail burned into me from the night I was accused. 17. The whispers, the accusations, my father's words, for the good of the family, and the silence that followed. It all came rushing back so violently I thought I might drop the glass in my hand. My fingers trembled around the stem. The wine rippled as if it, too, remembered. I tried to tell myself maybe I was mistaken. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. But no, I wasn't wrong. I couldn't be wrong. That necklace had carved itself into my memory the moment it was taken from me. And now it was here, worn casually as though it had never carried the weight of my exile. My heart pounded. I wanted to walk out, to escape the noise, the smell of perfume, the burning heat crawling up my neck. But my feet wouldn't move. It was as if I had been nailed to the floor. I circled slowly, finding an angle to see it better. Every shimmer confirmed the truth. The same design. The same flaw in the clasp. No doubt remained. The past wasn't past. It was alive. It was glittering in the center of that ballroom, daring me to acknowledge it. I could feel anger rising like fire in my throat. Anger. And grief. And something else I hadn't felt in years. A dangerous kind of hope. Because if the necklace had survived, maybe the truth had too. I remembered the messages. Don't come back better for everyone. At the time, I thought it was cruelty. But standing there, I began to wonder, what if it was fear? What if someone had been afraid that one day I might see exactly what I was seeing now? I gripped the stem of the glass tighter, trying to steady my breath. My reflection in the mirror across the hall caught my eye. I looked pale, almost ghostly. But my eyes, they were burning. I thought about walking straight up to the woman, asking her where she had gotten it. Demanding an answer. Demanding justice right there under the lights of that grand ballroom. But I stopped myself. This wasn't the moment. Not yet. I told myself, this is a beginning, not an ending. The necklace had found its way back to me for a reason. And if fate had brought me face to face with it again, then I couldn't run. Not anymore. The music swelled around me as if nothing had happened. People kept laughing, clinking glasses, trading shallow compliments. But for me, everything had shifted. The air was heavier, sharper, charged with something I had been waiting for without even knowing it. I finished the last sip of wine and set the glass down, my hand still shaking. I smiled when someone passed by and greeted me. But the smile was empty. Inside, a storm had already begun. When the night finally ended, I stepped out into the cool air. Dallas lights glittered against the sky, cars lining up to collect guests in their gowns and tuxedos. But I barely saw any of it. All I could see was that necklace burning in my mind. That night, I understood something with a clarity I had never known before. My story was not over. The exile had not been final. The truth had not been buried. I walked away from the gala with a single vow echoing through me. If the past had chosen to reveal itself again, then I would not look away. I would not remain silent. The necklace was more than jewelry. It was proof. And proof meant my time had come. When I woke up the morning after the gala, I knew I couldn't just go back to Austin and pretend nothing had happened. The image of that necklace haunted me. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a ghost walking in plain sight. If it had survived, then so had the truth. I checked out of the hotel, but I didn't drive home. Instead, I searched for something I had heard in passing years ago. A small jewelry store in Dallas that had been around for decades. People said the owner never forgot a face or a piece of gold. If there was any chance my family's secret had passed through here, this was where I would find it. The shop was tucked between a laundromat and a bakery. The windows were dusty. The neon sign flickered like it was tired. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and metal that had outlived its first owners. There were glass cases filled with watches, rings, and trinkets that once meant the world to someone. Behind the counter stood an old man. Thin frame skin weathered by time-silver hair combed back. His eyes were sharp. Not cruel, but piercing in a way that made you feel like he measured the weight of your soul. He greeted me in a soft Spanish accent and asked if I was looking for something special. I slid my phone across the counter. The photo I had taken at the gala glowed on the screen. The necklace. The one they said I stole. For a moment, he didn't speak. His gaze fixed on it. His lips pressed together. Then slowly he said, "Yes, I remember this piece. It came through here, long time ago." My breath caught. I asked him if he was sure. He nodded as if it had just walked into his store yesterday. I asked when. He said, maybe 10 years ago, maybe more. I pressed further, and that's when he leaned on the counter, lowering his voice as if he was telling me something forbidden. Two women brought it in, one older, one younger. They argued before they even came inside. The older woman insisted on selling. The younger one was crying. I remember because it was strange to see tears over something so beautiful. But they sold it anyway. Quickly. Almost desperately. I felt my stomach twist. My voice shook as I asked if he could recognize them. He hesitated, so I pulled out my phone again, this time scrolling to the only pictures I still had saved. Old family photos I should have deleted years ago. Evelyn. And her daughter, my cousin. I placed the screen in front of him. He studied it carefully. Then he looked back at me with certainty. Yes, those are the ones. That woman, she was the one who held the necklace. The girl stayed quiet. My knees nearly gave out. I gripped the counter to steady myself. It wasn't a rumor. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't my fault. The man must have seen the storm in my face. He reached into a drawer and rummaged through a stack of faded folders. After a few minutes, he pulled out a photocopy, a record of the transaction. He explained he kept them for tax purposes. The paper was yellowed, the ink slightly blurred, but there it was. A signature. Her name. Evelyn. I felt tears sting my eyes. For years I had begged for something, anything, that would prove I wasn't the thief they made me out to be. And now here it was. Not gossip, not memory, not a child's desperate defense. Paper, ink, proof. My hands trembled as I held it. The man said he shouldn't really let me take it. But when he looked at me again, his face softened. "Keep it," he whispered. Sometimes the truth belongs more to the wounded than to the law. I walked out of that store into the blinding Dallas sunlight. The paper clutched in my hand felt heavier than any stone I had ever carried. It was not just proof of innocence. It was proof of betrayal. For years, they let me drown in silence. For years, they let me believe I was worthless. All the while, they knew. They knew what had happened. They knew who had sold the necklace. And they chose to bury me instead. Standing there on the sidewalk, I realized something. I had not been crazy. I had not been dramatic. I had been betrayed. And now, I finally had a weapon sharp enough to cut through the lies. I looked at the copy one more time. The name glared back at me in black ink. Evelyn. It was her hand that signed it. Her hand that pushed me out of my own family. I folded the paper carefully, slid it into my bag, and whispered to myself, they tried to erase me. But I'm still here. And this time, I have the truth. When I finally turned my car toward Tulsa, my hands were trembling on the wheel. The roads felt both familiar and foreign. Every street corner carried a memory. Every tree, every store sign was like a ghost whispering my name. I had sworn to myself years ago that I would never come back here, that this place was a coffin, and I had already been buried inside it once. But this time was different. This time I had the proof. I had the truth folded carefully in the envelope resting on the passenger seat. A photocopy of the transaction. The old jeweler's handwriting. Evelyn's signature. Marcus's signature. Evidence that what I carried all these years, the shame, the exile, the silence was never mine to carry. Still, when I parked in front of my father's house, my chest tightened. It was the same pale siding, the same cracked driveway. Even the porch light was crooked in the same way it had been when I was a girl. And yet I felt like a stranger standing at my own doorstep. I almost turned back. I almost drove away. But then I heard my father's voice echo in my memory. For the good of the family. I pressed the doorbell. The sound rang through me like a bell at an execution. When the door opened, it was him. My father. His hair thinner, his back more stooped. But his eyes, those eyes were the same cold slate that had once turned away from me. Sienna, he said. No joy, no welcome. Just my name spoken like a problem he thought had been solved long ago. I didn't wait for him to invite me in. I stepped across the threshold, my legs steady even though my heart was not. The living room looked untouched. The same floral couch. The same framed photographs of Marcus at his graduations, Evelyn at her charity events. Not a trace of me. It was as if I had never existed. Evelyn appeared first. She froze when she saw me, but only for a moment. Then she smoothed her blouse, forced a smile, and said, "Well, what a surprise." Behind her, Marcus shuffled into the room. His eyes darted toward mine, then down to the floor. He looked older, yes, but also smaller somehow. As if guilt had been eating him hollow from the inside. We sat in silence for a beat that felt like a century. Then I laid the envelope on the coffee table. My voice cracked, but I didn't let it falter. This is the proof. The necklace you accused me of stealing, you sold it. Together. And you let me burn for it. The air snapped tight. Evelyn's smile collapsed. That's absurd, she said quickly. Anyone can fake papers. But her hands were trembling. I leaned forward, my words sharp. The jeweler remembered you. Both of you. The older woman and the younger one who couldn't stop looking over her shoulder. He remembered your faces. He signed this copy himself. Tell me, do you want me to read out the details, or will you admit it? Marcus shifted. His lips parted, then closed again. His chest rose and fell like he was drowning. Evelyn snapped at him. Don't you dare! But it was too late. His voice broke out low and shaking. "She's telling the truth," he whispered. "It was us. I didn't want to, but Mom said it was the only way. And when Dad found out, he said it would destroy us if anyone knew. They decided it was easier if you—" His eyes finally lifted to mine, full of tears, full of shame. "If you were the one who disappeared." For a moment, the room vanished around me. All I could hear was the echo of his words, the confirmation of the nightmare I had lived for years, the truth naked and undeniable. My father sat down heavily in his chair, saying nothing. His silence was worse than Evelyn's lies. He didn't even look surprised. Evelyn's face twisted. "You don't understand. Everything I did was to protect this family. You had always been difficult, and when that necklace went missing, it seemed convenient. I thought you'd survive. I thought you'd move on." Her words sliced through me like broken glass. Convenient. That's what I was to her. Not a daughter. Not even a person. Just a convenient scapegoat. I stood. My hands were trembling, but my voice was clear. "You didn't just steal a necklace. You stole my name. You stole my home. You stole years of my life. And you thought I would stay gone forever. But here I am." Evelyn flinched. Marcus wept quietly. My father stared at the floor, his silence like a wall of stone. I picked up the envelope, slid the papers back inside, tucked them under my arm. "I didn't come here for your apology," I said. "I came here for the truth. And now, I have it." Then I walked out. The air outside was sharp cold, cutting against my skin. But it felt clean. For the first time in years, I breathed without chains around my chest. As I stepped off that porch, I knew something had shifted forever. I was no longer the girl they had exiled. I was the woman they had tried to erase, and I had returned. I drove back to Tulsa with the envelope on the passenger seat, and the past breathing down my neck. The highway unspooled like an old tape. Gas stations, billboards, a sky the color of faded denim. I told myself to keep breathing, in and out, steady, because what waited at the end of the road was not a memory anymore. It was a reckoning. I called them from the curb and asked them to meet me in the living room. My father opened the door and stepped aside without a word. The house smelled the same, lemon polish and old carpet, but nothing felt like home. Evelyn stood near the mantel with that careful smile she wore for company. Marcus hovered by the hallway like a shadow that had lost its shape. My mother folded and refolded a dish towel as if it could save her. I did not sit. I set the envelope on the coffee table and kept my hand on it. My voice was calm, colder than I meant it to be. I told them I had been in Dallas. I told them I had found the store. I told them the owner remembered the necklace. Evelyn laughed too softly, called it a misunderstanding, said I was reading too much into it. I opened the envelope. Paper slid into the light. The photocopy, the description of the piece, the name that matched the woman who had raised me to say please and thank you even while she was teaching me how to disappear. Silence hit the room like a pane of glass. Marcus went still. Evelyn's face drained of color and then flushed hot. My mother took one step toward me and then stopped as if a wire had tightened around her ankles. My father stared at the page as if it were a lit match. I looked at them one by one and let the words land where they needed to. Back then, you let me carry a name I did not earn. A thief. This is the proof of what really happened. If I do not hear the truth today, I will go to the police. I will walk this paper into a station and put it on a desk. I will not hesitate. The air thinned until it felt like the whole room had been sealed in plastic. Evelyn's mouth shook. She said I was being dramatic, that this would ruin everything, that families handle their problems inside their own walls. Marcus could not lift his eyes. His hands were clenched so tight his knuckles went white. My mother whispered my name as if it might break the spell. Then my father made a sound I had never heard from him. A low, broken sound, like a beam splitting under too much weight. He sat down slowly and put his hands over his face. When he spoke, his voice came out raw. He said he had known I had not taken the necklace. He said he had known it the very night they sent me away. He said the boy was so young then, that if the truth came out, he would be expelled, branded, that one mistake would follow him forever. He said he had chosen silence. He said he had chosen to let me carry the blame because he believed I could survive it, for the good of the family. The words did not feel like words. They felt like a door I had been pounding on for years finally unlatching and revealing a room full of smoke. Truth and cowardice, tangled together until I could not tell where one ended and the other began. My mother started to cry. Not neat tears, not the kind she dabbed away with a monogrammed napkin. She cried the way a person cries when the floor gives out beneath them. She said she had failed me. She said she had told herself I was strong, that I would land on my feet, that protecting the son would keep the roof from collapsing. She said she had chosen the roof over the daughter. She said she was sorry. She said it again and again until the words sounded like water. Evelyn tried to speak, but nothing came. Her lips formed apologies that never fully arrived. She looked at me with a mixture of terror and calculation, as if searching for a version of this night she could still manage. I did not help her find one. Marcus finally looked up. His eyes were wet and empty at the same time. He said he had wanted to tell the truth, but every day he waited made it harder. And then years passed, and the lie became the house they lived in. He said he was sorry. He said he did not deserve forgiveness. He said he would go with me to the station if that was what I needed to breathe again. I listened to all of it. I let it settle on my skin like rain after a long drought. My heart pounded the way it had on the night they pushed me out. But the fear was different now. It had edges I could hold. I told them I was not here to negotiate a softer story. I told them the paper in front of us was real. I told them I had learned how to live without them. And I could learn how to testify if I had to. I said I wanted the truth said out loud in this room, where the lie had been planted. I said I wanted to hear them name what they did to me. My father lifted his head and met my eyes. He said the word. He said they had framed me to protect the son. He said it straight, without ornaments, without excuses. My mother nodded through tears until her shoulders shook. Evelyn whispered that it had been a mistake, then corrected herself, called it a choice. The clock in the hallway ticked, and every second sounded like another year being released from my chest. I gathered the papers and slid them back into the envelope. I felt taller and lighter and older all at once. "Thank you for saying it," I said. "Thank you for finally telling the truth. But I am not the girl you buried to keep your house upright. Not anymore. I will decide what happens next. Not you. Not fear. Not the old story." I walked to the door. No one tried to stop me. The porch light hummed over my head, a tired halo, and the evening air met me with a clean cold that stung and soothed in the same breath. Behind me, the house creaked as if shifting its weight after a long, long pause. On the sidewalk, I stood very still and listened to my own heartbeat. Steady now, certain. I had not won everything, but I had taken back my name. And with the envelope warm under my arm, I knew this truth would not be buried again. I stepped off the curb, and for the first time since that night long ago, I felt the ground hold me. Morning came soft and pale, and the phone kept lighting up with their names. Not Evelyn, not Marcus, only my parents. Again and again. A request to meet. No explanations in text. Only please. Only we need to see you. Days passed like birds skimming the surface of water. I tried to work. I tried to sleep. But the envelope on my table breathed like a living thing. Truth has a pulse when it finally finds paper. I chose a small cafe on a quiet street. No chandeliers. No portraits on the wall. Just the smell of beans and warm bread, and a window that let the morning in without asking for anything. I arrived early and sat with a cup I did not drink. My hands did not shake, but my heartbeat wrote its own rhythm in my throat. I told myself I was not here to reopen a wound. I was here to close it in the cleanest way I knew. They came together, smaller than I remembered. Time had folded their backs, softened their voices. My father saw me first. He did not try a smile. He just took the chair across from me, as if his legs were learning how to bend. My mother sat beside him and kept her purse in her lap like a shield she did not know how to put down. No one spoke at first. We listened to the grinder whir, the door chime ring, the soft clatter of cups carried to tables where nothing hurt. My father reached across the wood and found my hands. His palms were rough, the same rough that once lifted me onto his shoulders to see fireworks in a park long ago. When he spoke, his voice trembled. "We were wrong," he said. "We chose to protect the son, and left the daughter to drown. I told myself you would survive, because you were strong, because you were always the one who could stand up alone. I told myself a story that made me a good man, but I was not. I was a coward. I am sorry." The words did not feel like stones thrown at me. They felt like stones being lifted from my chest, one by one, leaving bruises where the weight had lived. My mother's fingers tightened around the purse. Her eyes were already wet before she spoke. "I do not deserve to call you my child," she said. "I chose quiet when I should have chosen you. I believed silence would keep our house standing, but silence is a hammer when it falls on the wrong person. If there is any room in you, even a small room, let me stand in the doorway and ask for another chance." The cafe sounds dimmed. I saw the nights I worked under buzzing lights, the walks home in rain, the messages that told me to stay gone. I saw the mornings I held my face over a sink that was not mine, saying, "You are not a thief. You are not." I saw the girl I had been, shivering but unbroken, building a life from scraps and stubbornness. And I saw the two people in front of me, the ones who had taught me to tie my shoes and say sorry to strangers, the ones who had not said sorry to me until now. I wanted to hold on to my anger. Anger is clean. It keeps your back straight and your steps fast. But anger is also hungry, and it eats the future first. I breathed in, slow, let the air sit inside my ribs, then breathed out. "I forgive you," I said. The words surprised me with how they sounded in the air. Soft, but not small. "I forgive you, but forgiveness is not forgetting. It is not a door back to the old house. It is a path that goes forward, with new rules." They looked at me as if I had placed water within reach after a long walk through heat. My father nodded once as if something inside him had finally unclenched. My mother covered her mouth and sobbed in a way that made the barista glance over and then look away. I kept my voice even. "I cannot be the daughter I was," I said. That girl was left on a porch with a suitcase and a silence that lasted years. I am not her anymore. I built a life that does not ask permission. If you want to walk in that life, you will do it with the truth under your feet. No more stories to make pain look pretty. No more choosing the child who needs less noise over the one who needs more love. My father whispered that he would earn it, If I let him. My mother said she would answer any question I asked, even the ones that hurt. I believed them, not because the past was suddenly light, but because my hands were finally free to set it down. We sat there a while longer. We talked about small things because big things had already been named. The coffee cooled. Morning tilted toward noon. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the quiet inside me relax. When we rose to leave, my father started to reach for a hug, then stopped, waiting for my yes. I stepped forward and let my cheek rest against his shoulder. It lasted only a moment, but it felt like a bridge being laid plank by plank over a river I thought could not be crossed. Outside, the light was tender and ordinary. Cars passed. A dog barked. Someone laughed at something that had nothing to do with grief. I stood on the sidewalk and filled my lungs with the day. They once left me behind for Marcus. They once chose the son and let the daughter become a rumor. But they had said the words. They had asked for forgiveness with their hands open, not their palms up. And I had chosen, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved quiet. Because I deserved mornings that were not built from old storms. I walked away without the envelope in my bag. It lay at home in a drawer, safe, legal. A line in the sand if I ever needed one. But I hoped I would not. I hoped the truth would be enough to keep the roof from lying again. As I turned the corner, I thought of the girl I had been, the one who learned to sleep with the light on, the one who counted breaths on bus benches and believed the world had no room for her. I wanted to tell her something simple. We made it. We did not break. We were tempered. They tried to erase me once, but the page is still here. And this time, I am the one holding the pen.